The muscle up is probably one of the most tricky elements in street lifting, and it's very, very hard to make it clean. So in this video, I want to explain to you all the reasons why a muscle up can be rated invalid in a street lifting competition. So stay tuned. For this video, I will use the rule book of the organization Final Rep. It's, to this date, the biggest one, and we're using the rules for the year 2024. As you know, competitive sports evolve, and so also the rule sets can evolve. And that's why it's important to note that this video is for this year and the upcoming competitions in this year. Reason number one for an invalid attempt is a failed muscle up. That means you did not make it successful over the bar. Easy to show, looks like this. You could make it up. Reason number two for an invalid muscle up is that you are using a false grip. It is allowed to use a semi-false grip. That means you can rotate your wrists upward and hold it with your own power. The moment the wrist is placed above the bar and there's contact from the wrist forearm part to the bar, the moment this happens, it's an invalid attempt, because then we don't really have a muscle up anymore, because people could start a slow muscle up execution like that. And that is nor good or bad, it's just a different movement pattern, and so it's banned from street lifting competitions. If you want to compete someday, then I will definitely suggest you to get our new competition bundle. It contains the King of Weighted belt, SL Pro 7mm stiff elbow sleeves. We will also put in the new SL Pro Performance wrist wraps, and to understand how to train, you also get the Understanding Calisthenics ebook, all together for a best price, and you can save up to 25% if you get the bundle. Reason number three for an invalid muscle up is entering the muscle up with bent arms. And this is probably, next to the fail, the reason why most athletes get their muscle ups invalid, because they just enter with their arms bent. Why is it forbidden? Because in order to make the muscle ups more comparable, we want to get rid of the use of momentum or any other cheating movements that can make a repetition easier. And if we're using this shortening, lengthening cycle, then we can create the spring-like effect, and we can speed up our repetition by storing this elastic force in our tendons and muscles and using it on the way up. And so that people do not create techniques where they jump in and create the most crazy movement patterns in order to create some advantages. It's just forbidden in first place in order to not let those movement patterns develop. Because if you will allow it, there will be people pushing it into an extreme. That's just the way it is if something is to win. So, rule standard is that you need to enter with your arms straight, and you are not allowed to bend the elbow before you start to pull. So you are not allowed to do this and then straightening up. You need to start the whole repetition with the arm straight, and then just for the pull, you start to bend the elbow. Reason number four why your muscle ups are rated invalid is the use of kicking or kipping. And to let you hear how kicking and kipping is defined by Final Rep, I will just read out what is written in the rules regarding kipping and kicking for muscle ups. The athlete generates momentum with an excessive tilting movement in the pelvis, an excessive hyperextension in the spine, or with a kicking movement of the legs, which makes it easier for him or her to overcome the bar. A minimal change in the knee and the hip angle that is not sudden and not to the athlete's advantage is allowed. Sudden kipping and kicking before initiating the pull is not allowed. In order to better understand how kipping and kicking is defined in pictures, I will now show you for each definition within the rules an example of a more extreme invalid muscle up. The first definition was an excessive tilt in the pelvis. That means that we're going from a strong anterior tilt to a strong posterior tilt. So basically a lot of hip hinge on the way up. How could that look like? We're entering, go hollow, and then we are throwing up ourselves with a kicking movement in the hips, and so moving from a stronger anterior tilt to a stronger posterior tilt. Second definition of kicking was a strong hyperextension in the spine. So the hyperextension alone is not forbidden, but a strong hyperextension will always lead to that hip kick motion, similar to that change from anterior to posterior tilt. It's basically the same compensation, just described in other words from another origin. So it will look pretty similar. So if I go now and I now try to arch a bit more extreme, in order to go out of this arch, I need to crunch myself in, and that will automatically lead to a very strong hip kick movement, and that will be forbidden in competition. Next definition will be kicking of the legs, which can be defined as excessive bending in the knee and in the hip together, which will look like this, shown as an extreme form. If you have a little change in the knee angle and the hip angle, that is totally fine and will not be rated invalid by the judges, but the judges, they have a bit of tolerance to decide it's valid and invalid. So you might see in some competition, as it's not exactly defined, someone getting through with a certain technique and another one maybe with another judge getting the repetition rated invalid. That's just how it is at the moment. It's working with humans, and working with humans always will lead to a certain form of mistakes and errors, and that is fine. If you want to avoid invalid, then just don't kick in the first place. So I will now try to show you an amount of kicking in the legs and knees, which will probably be given valid in the competitions. Reason number 5 for an invalid muscle up is a loss of control. That means you are not able to control the additional weight or your legs after passing the bar. That could look like that. And you will get an invalid. Reason number 7 why your muscle up is invalid is a downward movement on the way up. That means the moment the movement is reversed, even for a short amount of time, the repetition is counted as invalid. It mostly happens during the transition. If you're losing a bit of balance, you're slightly falling back, and then you are able to push yourself up though. But at this point, the repetition would already be invalid. Trying to show it to you, it's not that easy, but let's see if we can get it. Like that. Reason number 7 why your muscle up is rated invalid is that you don't lock out your elbows on top. It's the most unnecessary way in order to get your muscle up invalid, because you will never have a strength issue on top. Never ever. So it's usually just a lack of concentration or a lack of practice of this movement pattern in training. So when you're performing your competition muscle ups, always make sure to lock the elbows on top before you're going down again, because otherwise you're just wasting an attempt. So if you stop here, invalid, you need to fully extend that elbow. The next, and again, super unnecessary reason why your muscle up is judged invalid is that you are not listening to the judge's commands. There are just two to remember, so it's pretty easy. The first one will be the go signal. You will get the go signal once the additional weight is stationary and once your arms are straight and you are ready to enter the repetition. Then you will get the signal from the judge, which is called go, and then you can start your repetition. The next signal is the signal box, and that signal will be given to you once your arms are fully straight on top. So you rest shortly on top, you listen to the judge, he says box, and then you need to go to the box. If you're not going back on the box, but on the floor, repetition is also invalid. And this is mostly for security reasons, because there are people muscle upping 30, 40, even 50 kg nowadays. And if you are like doing this, and you like bring it to the floor, you can destroy the floor, destroy the plates, you can maybe injure yourself on the legs. So in order to prevent that, it's forbidden and you need to go back to the box. So what we want to do is we hear the word go, now we can go, form our muscle up, we straighten the arms on top, and then it's box, we can go down and we go back to the box. The last reason for an invalid muscle up, and probably the reason most of you have been waiting for, is the so-called chicken wing muscle up. Now, when we're talking about street lifting events, there is no one doing extreme chicken wing muscle ups, which will look like that. Let me show it to you. No one will does it that extreme. But what you will see is, due to natural imbalances in the shoulder, is a transition where you have a faster pace on the right over the left, or vice versa. And this is also forbidden if it's clearly to see that there was a visible difference in the upward rotation of the elbows. So the more imbalanced you are, the harder it is actually for you to fulfill this rule. Because now I'm trying to show a much less extreme but still invalid variation of this. Like this would also be a no rep. So definitely train for symmetric transitions of the elbow.